Let's normalize not being normal. Let's just yell. Actually, let's just yell. Let's normalize yelling. Hey, HODINKEE! What's the deal with date windows?
Hey HODINKEE, are watch hand designs just decorative, or do all those different hand designs have historical purposes?
The real answer to the question is watch hands can be almost anything. The purpose of watch hands is obviously to point out the time. And so you could say that the primary purpose of any kind of watch hand is legibility. But there's so many different styles of watch hands, dozens if you categorize them according to the sort of main category of watch hands, and probably hundreds if you think about all of the variants. You'll find that watch designers usually make an attempt to make the watch hands match the rest of the watch. So there's a couple of styles of hands called Louis XV and Louis XVI hands, and as you can imagine, these are incredibly ornate, sort of interwoven, lacy design that, well, really kind of reminds you of the pre-revolutionary French court. But they would look awfully funny on a dive watch, and they wouldn't do anything for legibility in actual use. So on a dive watch, you tend to find what are called plongeur-style hands, which plongeur literally means diver. And the whole idea there is really for you to be able to read the time instantly. So if you have a utility watch, for instance, you're going to see hands whose purpose is to be immediately visible and which are designed to point clearly and precisely to the numbers of the markers on the dial. Plongeur-style hands would look very funny on a dress watch, for instance.
Hey HODINKEE, I've been collecting for 5 years now. I started with some beautiful entry-level watches like the Seiko SKX and various swatches, which I hardly wear anymore. Most pre-owned websites don't buy inexpensive pieces like these. How can I sell them so some other young collector can enjoy them?
Honestly, there's a reason that most pre-owned sales sites don't really buy watches that are that inexpensive. You have to look at the costs associated with buying those watches. You've got to ship them. You've got to pay someone to photograph them. There are costs associated with shipping them back out. There are costs associated with keeping them in stock and maintaining the listing. And by the time you've subtracted all of that, if you're talking about a $75 to, let's just say, $150 watch, just for the sake of argument, you're talking about a tiny, tiny margin, and it's just not worth it. You'd have an easier time getting rich selling penny candy out of the back of a drugstore. What I would suggest, honestly, is don't think about selling them too quickly. The thing about people who are entering watch collecting is they're probably going to be looking at exactly the same watches that you were when you started out. So an inexpensive Seiko 5 is always going to be an attractive option. And chances are that somebody who is thinking about buying one is going to want to buy one that's new. What I would suggest doing is, just hold on to them. There's not much to be gained by selling them financially, certainly. And while it's great to think of passing them on to somebody else, that's probably more practically done as a gift. If you hang on to them also, I think that you'll find in years to come, as your collecting continues to develop and as your tastes continue to evolve, you're really going to like having a watch that's kind of a tangible connection to the beginning of your collecting activity and to your life as a watch enthusiast. And having a tangible connection to the past is kind of what watches are all about.
Hey HODINKEE, I guess I could Google this, but I'd rather hear it from you. What's a chronometer and why should I want one?
So the word chronometer, as far as anyone knows, began as a very non-specific marketing term. There was a watchmaker named Jeremy Thacker, an English watchmaker, who apparently coined the term chronometer, measurer of time, in the year 1714 in a pamphlet that he had written and had published, basically in order to praise his own work, which is something that watchmakers love to do. There is some question as to whether Jeremy Thacker actually existed, however. There are some historians who think that the entire pamphlet was actually a satire on watchmakers and clockmakers and their overblown claims of precision, and it was actually written by a satirist who was a member of Jonathan Swift's circle. And I think that probably both stories are equally plausible, but that's where the word came from. Now, chronometer didn't really achieve a specific meaning until fairly late in the usage of the word. Nowadays, it means a watch which, according to an international standard, ISO 3159, runs to within a certain fairly narrow set of precision parameters. And the advantage to having a watch that's a certified chronometer is that it's a watch whose movement, and the chronometer certification is for the movement, not for the entire watch. It's a watch whose movement has been certified to run within particular precision constraints by an independent inspection agency, and that is the COSC, the Contrôle Officiel Suisse de Chronometre, I believe. You can ask, and a lot of people do, whether or not the COSC is actually independent, considering that it's dependent for its existence on the Swiss watch industry. But at least nominally, it's a third-party agency that guarantees you that your watch will run within certain specifications, and that's really the advantage.
Hey HODINKEE, is there any good reason other than engraving to want a closed case back?
Having a surface on which you can engrave is certainly a practical good reason. There are a lot of watch enthusiasts, well, I don't know if it's a lot, there are a certain number of watch enthusiasts who are traditionalists, and they really feel that the problem with a display back, regardless of the quality of the movement or the quality of the finishing, is that it's just not what was traditionally done in watchmaking. Watches, as a rule, for most of the history of both pocket watches and wristwatches, did not have display backs. And the reason they didn't have display backs was because, as a rule, people weren't all that interested in looking at the movement. And now, of course, after the quartz crisis, those of us who are interested in mechanical watches, a lot of us kind of fetishize movements. We fetishize movement finishing. We fetishize our fascination with the mechanics of the watch. I said fetishize 3 times. Maybe it says more about me than it does about watch collectors. So if you're a traditionalist, having a display back on a watch can seem like a violation of tradition and a concession to sort of degenerate modern taste. George Daniels actually once wrote that the client for a high-grade English pocket watch would have been a gentleman who would have considered being interested in the movement a matter for tradesmen and something which was beneath him. Like I said, I think there's a certain group of enthusiasts who feel the same way. Me personally, I don't care if it's a $75 Seiko or a $75,000 complication. I like seeing the movement. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. That's the show. I know that if you were here in person, you'd give me a big hand. You throw a lot of stuff at the wall and you see what sticks. Please do not forget to like and subscribe because that's how I pay for my bread and cheese, and we'll see you next time.